Excellent!
This is the EVGA GTX 1080 for the win, and it's my first look at a 1080 with a custom PCB and a specially designed cooler, EVGA's ACX 3.0. I've already overviewed many of the features of the 1080 in my original video that you can check out via the card right up there, so today I'll be focusing on what makes this card different, and of course a bunch of benchmarks and some overclocking performance. I also want to talk about some of the critiques against the 1080, specifically the potential for GPU clock speed throttling and the current pricing and availability woes that have plagued the good, honest people who just want to buy one of these cards for the price that Nvidia announced them at back in May, goddammit. Before any of that though, a quick once-over of the card itself. At the heart of the 1080 for the win is the GP104, Nvidia's Pascal GPU that all 1080s are based on, as well as 8GB of GDDR5X memory running at 10,000 MHz effective clock speed. EVGA redesigned the PCB from the Founders Edition, which made it a bit taller, but they also increased the power delivery to a 10-phase design as compared to the 5-phase setup on the reference board, and added another 8-pin power connector to allow for higher overall power draw. On top of that is the newly redesigned ACX 3.0 cooler with 200mm double ball bearing fans with swept blades, direct contact copper heat pipes down below, and a large aluminum fin array for heat dissipation. It's an open design, and although it does run cooler than the Founders Edition, it will be pushing more warm air into your case, so keep airflow in mind if you're building a new system. The card does light up via the logo along the edge, as well as these panels on the fan side of the cooler, and these are RGB of course, so you can adjust the colors and some of the lighting effects via the EVGA Precision X OC software. Finally, there's a 2-position physical BIOS switch, which can be very handy if you're playing around with a variety of OC settings and want to easily jump between them rather than using software profiles. The For the Win edition comes manufacturer overclocked as well, with a base and boost clock of 1721 and 1860 as compared to the Founders Edition, which runs at 1607 base and 1734 boost. It's also 10.5 inches long. Now, I've heard varying opinions on the overall design here, and while I personally don't think it's the prettiest card ever, I think in the right system it could still look quite badass. Let me know what you think in the comments down below though. Okay, on to some testing, and let's start out with thermal throttling. Jay did a great video on this, and I was actually surprised to hear that his original Founders Edition card throttled so much. He started off hitting mid-1800s clock speeds, but after warming the GPU up with some gameplay, it dropped all the way down to the mid to low 1600s. That's a pretty significant drop, and it's caused by a variety of things, including the ASIC quality of your individual GPU, the ambient temperature in whatever room you're overclocking in, the effectiveness of your card's cooler of course, and whether the planets of our solar system are synchronized and aligned in perfect orbit. Throttling this severe sucks, and it didn't help that at the launch event last month, Nvidia made some bold claims by demoing an overclocked card running at 2.1 GHz and only hitting 67 degrees on air. This may have been a mistake in my opinion, as clearly the demo they were running was not very GPU intensive, and no one has found a card yet that can hit that frequency and stay that cool, especially with the Founders Edition cooler, under normal gaming load. All that said though, I wanted to see what frequencies my 1080 for the win and my 1080 Founders Edition would level out at after gaming for a while, so I concocted a simple test with Unigine Heaven on a loop over about 15 plus minutes, or however long it took the card to warm up to its maximum temperature. Due to heat pooling, the temperature kind of creeps up slowly until they hit 83 degrees Celsius on the Founders Edition, during which time the fans may ramp up a bit and the frequency may dip down as GPU boost attempts to keep everything under control. I did keep the AC on in the garage, so my ambient temperature was a steady 77 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, or 25 to 27 degrees Celsius, and with both cards running at full stock, here were my results. Both cards throttled, but not a whole lot. My GTX 1080 Founders Edition hit an initial peak frequency of 1873 MHz, but after temps got up to 83C, it pulled back to the mid to high 1700s, averaging about 1784. This is still a good 50 MHz above the advertised boost, so not bad. The EVGA 1080 for the win, being manufacturer overclock, hit an initial peak frequency of about 20-25 MHz, and after maxing out at 75C under load, throttled back to 1949. Again, still well above the advertised boost clock values, so pretty nice for a specially designed card. I'll continue to include throttle testing in my videos though, and for anyone who picks up a 1080, I would definitely recommend setting up a loop test to see where your GPU's frequency levels max out after 10 or 20 minutes of gameplay. Anyway, I overclocked this GPU as well, and it did give me some extra performance, but I was not able to consistently hit over 2.1 GHz. Added 120 points to the GPU and 95 to the memory, hit an initial OC of 2114 MHz, and then throttled back to about 2088 after the card warmed up. I did use a custom fan profile that ended up doing about 70% fan speed at max while benchmarking under full load, but it also kept the GPU cooler than when it was running with the stock profile, peaking at 69 degrees, so go figure. It's definitely not a bad overclock, but it does seem like these non-binned GPUs don't have a ton of extra headroom, although throttling under load was thankfully pretty minimal. Lesson learned here is definitely to ramp up those fan profiles on your 1080s, as it's minimal additional noise, but it gives you a decent amount of extra GPU speed. My overclocking results can be seen in the first couple benchmark slides. Speaking of which, it's time for some benchmarks. This time I have 4K, 1440, and 1080 resolution numbers. These were all run on an open test bed with an Intel Core i7-5930K CPU at 4.4 GHz, 16 gigs of G.Skill Ripjaws 4 2666 speed DDR4 memory, an EVGA X99 classified motherboard, and a HyperX Savage 240 gig SSD. Let's roll. So it should come as little surprise that the GTX 1080 for the win, running about 8 to 10% faster than the Founders Edition, also scores about 8 to 10% better frame rates across all the benchmarks. I was actually more impressed with the fact that the GPU temps stayed under control in the mid-70s under load, and the fan noise was quite minimal as well, since they don't spin up at all at idle, and under load only ramped up to 47% speed maximum at the stock profile. Here's a listen, in zero fan mode just for ambient noise. Here the fans at 47% speed, which is the max they got at the stock profile. Here it is at 69% speed, which is as fast as they got when I was overclocking. And finally 100% fan speed just to see what it sounds like. Hear what it sounds like. As for power draw though, that is the trade-off, as I did see power draw peaking above 400 watts with the For the Win card, whereas my Founders Edition only pulled about 305 watts maximum from the wall. I would feel a bit better about this if I was able to overclock the card a little bit more. Incidentally, while overclocking, I peaked at about 445 watts. Finally, there is the price, which at $680 is steep, but still less than the $700 Founders Edition. Availability seems to be the biggest challenge right now though, as retail cards are selling out instantly, and resellers in the US and abroad are charging ridiculous markups. We're told that in July though, there should be many more 1080s available on the market, so by next month, you should be able to get your hands on one for the actual list price. All things considered, EVGA has built a very nice card around the 1080 with an effective cooler and some extra value features beyond what you get with the Founders Edition. Bear in mind though that you're not getting a binned GPU with the For the Win, so your overclocking experience might have you wanting if you were really hoping to run at 2.1 GHz or beyond. If the RGB lighting isn't important to you, you could probably get equal performance and save 30 to 50 bucks by going with the superclocked or standard ACX 3.0 version of the 1080. As with all overclocking though, it will greatly depend on luck of the draw in the Silicon Lottery. Thanks a lot for watching this video though guys. Links to this card on Amazon as well as my Paul's Hardware store are down below. Hit the like button and get subscribed if you enjoyed it, and as always, thanks for watching.